People have heard deathbed confessions. What were some interesting ones? Story 1. When I was in the hospital, the guy in the bed next to me just asked to stop taking his meds as he was ready to die. Last thing I heard him say was, "There's no one waiting for me at home, so I'm going where they are." Wasn't really a shocking confession, just a lonely and heartbreaking one. Story 2. My dad had Alzheimer's and ended up in a secure ward. He was blind and almost deaf. I was visiting him one day. He didn't know who I was, but he started talking about me. He said I had done better than him in life and that he was proud of me. He was a quiet man IRL and never told me that when I was growing up. Looking back, he did things that my dumb butt never realized were for me. Like when his retired colleagues asked what he'd like as a present, he chose a scientific calculator. This was back in the 1970s. He had no use for it. He gave it to me for university. I thought he was just passing it on, not realizing that he'd asked for it with me in mind. Story 3. Not my story, but that of a hospice worker who spoke to my class. For those who don't know, hospice is a method of end-of-life care that focuses on alleviating the emotional and physical pain of a dying person to ease their passing rather than combating their imminent death. One of her patients was a bed-bound woman in her 90s who was generally unresponsive but had flashes of recognition and engagement. It's hard to gauge the level to which unresponsive patients are detached from their surroundings, so they encourage family members to keep their company in hopes of soothing the patient. Now, this patient was from a U.S. state that prided itself on its state university and the university's football team. The woman's family had attended this university for 4 or 5 generations. During her hospice care, however, her great-granddaughter was the first in their family to decide to go to a different school, the rival state's university. In fact, her family was supportive of her decision but often joked about her being the rebel or Judas or what you have. One day, they were all sitting around the woman's bedside, teasing the girl about her decision. Suddenly, the patient sat up, looked at her great-granddaughter, said traitor, and effing died. Jesus Christ, talk about a traumatizing experience. It's not that serious. She just went to a different college. It caused that much emotional impact on this dying woman that she called her a traitor just died. Tell me that would not be ingrained in your brain till the day you died. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry to hear this one. This one's, it's pretty rough. Story 4. My grandfather had pretty terrible dementia, and he kept making deathbed confessions as he knew he didn't have much time left. They were often about witnessing a murder and not telling anyone, but each time he confessed to us, the details changed. It happened a couple of times a day over the course of his final week. We finally figured out that he watched the local news and hear about these things happening, then would think he actually had witnessed them. Story 5. It's my time to shine. I worked at a hospital in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, a small town near Munich, for the last 14 years. My job there is not fancy at all. I move people around, throw the trash out, and occasionally I take care of some handy-like work, fixing a leaking shower head and stuff like that. As you can imagine, I get to see a lot of patients that come and go. Some of them pass away, such is life, I guess. I remember a few instances of people confessing to me their biggest regrets. Here are some examples. An old Polish woman told me that she regretted not effing Hitler when she had the chance. Her words. I wanted to ask her about more context, but I was afraid to be honest. Number 2. Another notable example is an old truck driver that used to work for an Eastern Germany company. He told me that he once run over some kids with his truck and was too afraid to stop and check if they were okay. Number 3. Once another Polish lady told me that she used to be a prostitute during Second World War and that she slept with very high up people in the government. She told me that she did not regret that part of her life, but that she could not tell anyone, and that was a very heavy emotional drag. She also told me that she aborted more than 5 babies during that time. Story 6. My partner's grandfather never spoke about his World War II service. We are Australian. He joined after lying about his name and age, so we can't find any records. He would have been 16. We do know he was in the Pacific somewhere, and when he got back, his lie was exposed, and because he was by then 18, he was drafted under his real name and promptly arrested. He would do anything to not get sent back to fight. He got drunk, fought, and self-harmed. His adult life was spent mostly being an alcoholic and being a crap husband and father. Through in his later years, he was able to make some good. Grandkids appearing softened him. In his dying hours, he relived his time at war. Some things he said, "Oh God, they are here. The Japs are behind us, sir. Stab him, effing stick him. Help, medic all around." And he also had a string of names he kept saying. Such a tortured, broken mind. Story 7. Not a deathbed confession, but the last conversation I had with my grandfather has always stuck with me. He had Parkinson's and lived on a farm outside of town. One day he looked at me and said, "I'm getting too old to take care of Mom, my grandmother. I need you to do that for me, okay?" His health deteriorated pretty rapidly from that point onward. I still call my grandmother every single day and try to get back home whenever I can to help out around the farm. Story 8. I have an amazing one. My great-grandmother lived a very long and interesting life. She was in her 20s in the Great Depression. She had a wild streak from those days that we don't really know much about, to the point that we actually don't know our great-grandfather's name, just the husband she took later. Over the course of nearly 100 years' life, she had collected owls. Literally thousands of owl figurines. She had clocks, wall hangings, pot holders, lamps, stained glass art, salt shakers, and little figurines that you could imagine, all depicting owls. We all wondered the importance of the owls. She never talked about them, we just all knew she loved owls. Well, when she was nearing death at the age of 98 or 99, and the doc said she had days, my grandparents went and talked to her and they asked her if she had anything she wanted to share, or ask before she goes. She thought for a moment, then said, "I never understood the owls." It turns out she didn't really give a crap about owls, near as we could piece together sometime in the 40s or 50s perhaps. She bought either a triplet or a set of salt/pepper shakers that were owls. Then someone got her the other. Those were the oldest owls anyone could remember. But from there, someone got her an owl to match, probably a pot holder or classmate, and all of a sudden her kitchen was owl themed. From there, it snowballed. The owls flowed like wine, baffling her for 60 years, eventually taking over as the bulk of her personal belongings. The moral is, if you're not actually into something, mention it early. Man, isn't that like the greatest plot twist of all time? How does that even happen? Like, if someone had a bunch of avocado things all around their kitchen, you would assume they probably like avocados. The fact they're just like, nah, just give it to me. I don't really care about them. It's just like, what? I feel like there's no way she didn't care that much about owls. Like, why was she going with it? Unless she's like, I guess it's my life now. I gotta match the theme now. Maybe that's how. She just had so many things given to her where she was like, you know what? I'm dedicated now. Story 9. I ran a nursing home growing up. From ages 5 to 10, I spent every weekend with residents. Because I was a kid, residents often confessed stuff they thought I wouldn't understand. Two stick out. One funny, one not. The first one was this woman was dying, maybe about 96. Even had her last burst of energy/life where she thought she was better. This is common. A black delivery man came with some flowers. After he left, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I can't believe I'm dying without having been with a colored man." The second one was while I was reading the Bible verses to a resident. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drop that baby in the well." Story 10. My great aunt passed away a couple of years ago. She was suffering from viral encephalitis and fluctuated in and out of consciousness. It was truly painful to watch, although a lot of family tended to be around her in those last days. I once happened to be alone with her when she made some fairly odd remarks, which I kept to myself since. On the day in question, I was playing games on my phone in her hospital room when she started to audibly mutter to herself. It became more urgent and intense. Eventually, she explicitly called me to her side. Her eyes looked huge and confused. I doubt she knew who I was. She spelled out her words, most of which were barely comprehensible, putting particular emphasis on boy and ingredient. I sat there for 15 minutes, listening to her erratic account of, as I finally gathered, how she sometimes used to cook eggs in the urine of a stable boy instead of water. She insisted that he was handsomely compensated for his services, but now and then she started to cry and couldn't stop. I googled this weeks later, and there indeed exists a traditional dish in China described in the West as a virgin boy egg. Apparently this concept had fascinated her and she frequently recreated this herself and served it to her family, which sometimes included my younger self, without explaining what it was. I am not sure if she felt shame or enthusiasm about this. She often stammered something about the secret ingredient, but it quite obviously haunted her towards the very end of her life. Story 11. My great-grandfather was in his mid-90s when he died. Health was always good, but a tumor deemed too dangerous to operate on at his age went septic. He was dead a week later. I went to visit him in the hospital. My family used to see him a lot, but there was a falling out between him and my grandma several years before, so we stopped seeing them. Funny enough though, I was constantly ran into him at the store, and we always had nice chit-chats. Anyway, in the hospital he told me not to worry about him. Most everyone he's ever known was dead, and he was ready to die. The week he felt himself getting sick, he knew something was off, and made arrangements to get my great-grandmother into a nursing home. He took care of her with Alzheimer's, so he wouldn't die until he knew she was taken care of. They were married for over 70 years. My favorite story is that every Sunday for 50 years, he would drop my great-grandma off at church and then sat in the car and waited for her. Hated religion, but loved his wife. Story 12. I didn't witness this personally, as it was between my grandfather and his father. My great-grandfather was not a nice man. He beat his children. One time he beat his daughter with a table leg, and I am assuming did the same to his wife. Anyway, she left him and the kids behind. This was the 30s, and I'm assuming that he didn't allow her to take the kids with her, and it's not like women's rights were great back then. My grandfather left home at 8 years old and fended for himself for his entire life. On his deathbed, Nasty Grandpa told the boys he had a bunch of money stashed on the old property, and if they went to see him, he would tell them where it was. No no one went. Story 13. I did some work in a nursing home, helped with a guy that had a bad stroke, could hardly speak, some trouble moving around. To speed up the story, a nurse and I had some trouble with him, and later I said that stroke really made him mean. She replied, "Not really. I grew down the street from him, and he was always a miserable man. He was always drinking and abusive to his wife and kids. His kids came to our house all the time and stayed, and my folks let them because he was so awful to them. Later, he had that stroke and they dumped him here. They never come to see him, not even at Christmas or his birthday. If we need them for something, they come in and see us and don't go to his room or look for him. They just do what needs to be done and leave." Story 14. I wasn't there to witness her confession, but the story leading up to it is so intriguing. My mom was adopted, and my grandparents never kept it a secret. They loved my mom like their own. When she was growing up, she tried to find out as much as she could about her and her adopted brother's birth parents. Back in those days, though, info like that wasn't exactly the easiest to find. My mom and uncle were brought to the orphanage with little to no info on each of their biological parents, or was elsewise requested to be kept secret. Eventually, my mom found enough info from notes she had gathered, like which families might have been likely to be related to her, some property info one can find at the library, and she just sort of pieced the puzzle together over her life. At a certain point, she was able to get the names of her mother and her brother's mother. She was able to find out she was a part of a big family with lots of brothers and sisters. But for my uncle, he found out that his mother had died not long after placing him for adoption. By the time she had gathered all of this info and found this much out, my mom was married, had my older sister, and was pregnant with me. I can't remember exactly what it was she found that led to it, or if she heard something from someone, but she got a phone number. That phone number went to the house of her biological mother. She called, and the voice of a young boy answered. My mom asked for the name she knew, and she hears, "Yeah, 1 second. Hey mom, phone's for you." My mom and her mom talk. It wasn't an easy conversation, and I'm just going to refer to my mom's mom as Biogran from here. Biogran is not comfortable with my mom contacting her at all. She doesn't ask my mom a lot of questions, but my mom says that she was just going to talk, and if Biogran wanted to hang up at any point, she could. My mom just gave her a short version of the story of her life, and then the conversation was over. Biogran after that would send letters to my mom on occasion, but Biogran made it a point of telling my mom she could never be found out by the rest of her family, and Biogran carried that secret with her until the day of her death. One of her daughters asked her, "Will you tell us where you went away that time?" And Biogran finally confessed. She had gone to a home for unwed mothers all those years ago to have my mom, the child of her affair. I've met 2 of my bio aunts, and sadly, both of them passed a few years ago. But dang, the TLDR is basically my biological grandmother had an affair with a milkman, left to go home for unwed mothers, had a child, did not tell her family until her deathbed. Story 15. Not a confession, but a denial and solid information that helped us clear a few pending matters. I worked for a federal law enforcement agency. We covered major felonies, some of which relate to organized crime. Not mafia per se, but open-ended criminal enterprises. We had a mid-level player as suspect for a string of cargo thefts, robberies, etc. Knew him for years, arrested him several times. He taunted us a fair bit. Lung cancer got a hold of him before we could build a solid case. Things went downhill fast. Went to see him at home just before he transferred to hospice. That he did at least 50% of what we suspected is an open secret. I knew it. He knew it. For whatever reason, chose to give me a break. He said, "If I give you something, will you sit on it for a few weeks?" Initially, I could not agree if he was going to leak info about something in progress, etc. He assured me that it could wait. I agreed. So he said, "I know that you're looking at me for the blank." I didn't do it. He admitted wanting to do it, told me he was responsible and where we could find the solid evidence to implicate 5 to 6 people. Why did he tell me? He said the other guy never treated anybody right. I did not ask him to elaborate. I moved on the info about 3 weeks later after an informant died. Never had to share info source because he pointed us to the substantial corroborating info. Story 16. My dad has a special ability to gain people's trust. In a good way. Twice now, he's had instances where dying people tell him things that they feel they can't tell their family. The one case was when my aunt's mother-in-law was dying. She explained to my dad that her husband cannot live alone and that they both agree he must find a new partner after she passes. He did. He remarried within a year of her passing, at the age of 81. The family was very upset about him moving on so fast. My dad had to stand up for him and reassure them that it was what his late wife wanted. Alright, that's really impressive though. I can't imagine getting married at the age of 81. I could be wrong, but I feel like at those ages, life just moves very slow. Like, there's not really much going on. Like, in your earlier years, when you're in college, or high school, or job hunting, in your 20s, Just in the early days of life, it's obviously very easy to find people to get married with because there's so much going on and there's so much stuff. But when you're 80, it's like everyone's already had their families or they're passed away or just having health issues. So it's very impressive that this 81-year-old was able to remarry at such a lovely age. Story 17. My great uncle actually confessed to having 2 illegitimate sons right before he kicked the bucket in front of his own children and grandchildren. The crazy thing was that none of his children knew this life of his. Not even my great aunt knew about it because she would have made a huge fuss if she was alive at the time and knew about it. What was crazier was that these 2 sons already passed away 5 and 7 years ahead of him respectively. He was 98 years old and his invisible sons were 65 and 69 years old. The children found out that one of his invisible sons actually was a teacher at a school that his granddaughters attended when they were in high school. Nevertheless, his children decided to reach out to the children of his invisible sons. They got connected and learned more stuff about my granduncle. The craziest thing was that I actually dated one of the granddaughters of one of the invisible sons, the one that passed away at the age of 69 years old. Talking about a few degrees of separation. Hey. Story 18. My great uncle had pancreatic cancer and was very frail because of it. I helped him bathe, use the restroom, and change him each morning. Not his last words to me, but something he said that has stuck with me since were, "I hate feeling so useless. I can't do this anymore. I'm so sorry you have to do this." I told him I never minded doing this for him. I loved him so much, and I'd always be there for him. I had to move away a few weeks later because my mom wanted me back home as I was living with my grandparents and him at the time. He passed away shortly after, and so did his cat that he had for almost 30 years a few days after him. He was a good man. Story 19. I worked as a night janitor in the children's cancer ward at my local hospital. There was a little boy, about 6 years old, laying in bed, and he called me into his room because he wanted help adjusting his pillow. He was hooked up with wires and stuff so he couldn't roll over to place the pillow how he wanted. Figuring I'd be allowed to do this, since a nurse wasn't really needed for it, I parked my cart outside the room and went in. In the room, he started asking me questions about my job. The first being, was I a nurse? I said no. He asked me if I seen his mom in the hallway, and told me she'd gone down to the cafeteria to get him a strawberry milk and a donut. I said no to that. He was quiet for a second. Then he looked me right in the face and said, "If I pass away soon, I hope that my mom is not sad." That hit me, like really, really hard. This kid was 100% aware that he could die. His mother would be affected by it. I didn't even know how to feel, so I told him that he wasn't going to pass away, and hundreds of people survive cancer, which is a big number to someone that young. I left shortly after and broke down crying in the bathroom. A few days later, I was wiping down the wooden support railings along the walls of the hallway, and his room was closed for cleaning plus disinfection. That sign is only hung outside of rooms when someone dies. Story 20. Not a deathbed confession exactly. I was a hospice volunteer and worked with a man with a brain tumor. He was in pretty good shape except for that. He was going nuts in the nursing home, and one day I took him for a ride around town. He had grown up there. Seemed like every other block he would point at an old building and say, "Used to be a whorehouse there. Empty lot. Used to be a building there. And it had a pretty good whorehouse there. There was a whore there until it burned down." We passed by this old, odd-looking apartment building that had more doors than it should have, and it appeared some of the doors were sealed up. He said that used to be a crib, and each door had a small room behind it, and each whore had her own room. We passed under a railroad bridge, and he pointed a flat area, and there used to be a black woman that ran the best whorehouse in the state right there. I finally laughed and said, "I guess I know what you spent your youth doing." Yeah, Jesus Christ, how many whorehouses did this man go to? This man just knew everything. He knew the whole geography. But he didn't exactly. He just knew the whole whorehouse geography. He probably knew the years too. Oh, that whorehouse? That was open from 1955 to 1960. Yeah, that whorehouse smelled like honey. He knew everything.